Allen here for the Move Better, Feel Better 5-day challenge that's starting in just 2 days on May 6th and runs through May 10th. And I have with me Marek Wyszynski. Hi, Marek.
Hello. So
Mar-
so good to be here.
yeah, it's good to have you. Marek is a physical therapist and also owns it's called New York. No, it's called Physical Therapy and Feldenkrais, New York City. Is that correct?
NYC, yes.
NYC.
Feldenkrais NYC.
Okay, thank you. Feldenkrais NYC. And Marek is got not only a very vibrant practice in New York City, but he's also been doing quite a lot of new things in the online world. And we have this title for our session today, which is that we're going to talk a little bit about images that move us. And I thought first, though, we'll just say that Marek is on day one of the challenge, and he is going to be teaching in the experience track, or the track that also people might identify themselves as adventuresome. And earlier in the day, Lavinia Plonka will be teaching. We don't have a little sneak peek with Lavinia, so we're just going to cover a little bit of both here today with Marek. And Marek, you guys are going to be kind of, I think of it as Moshe Feldenkrais' most famous lesson that at least Lavinia will be teaching, where we're using this particular kind of image. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that image and maybe give us some ideas about it.
So the theme will be both for Lavinia and my lesson. Mine will be a little bit more advanced, but still within the theme of pelvic clock. So it's very famous. Most people who start with the Feldenkrais method will have heard about the pelvic clock. To me, when I think of pelvic clock, two things, or maybe even three things come to mind. One is roundness, clock, meaning circularity. With this, it evokes feeling of, I'm not a very poetic person. I love science and concreteness, but for me, it's like my Buddhist teacher, Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, his calligraphies, this completeness, the wholeness, a circularity. With that, I think of smoothness of movement. Circle gives you a reference when you do a movement, any sort of movement. If it's a shoulder circle or if you move the pelvis in the circular way, it gives you an opportunity to feel how smooth, how round movement is. Often when we start with movements, the movement's a little jumpy, a little jerky, a little bit jagged. And as we continue with the lesson, we learn how to smooth it out. The second part that comes to my mind when I think of clock is precision. And if you imagine yourself standing in the middle of a room that is like a large clock or like some kind of plaza, circular plaza, and you're in the middle of it. 12 o'clock is in front of you, 6 o'clock is behind you, 3 o'clock is to the right, 9 o'clock to the left. If you think of this image of a clock, to me right away, I think of freedom, possibilities. And one of the wonderful things that Dr. Feldenkrais, the definitions of good posture by Dr. Feldenkrais was a state from where you can move in any direction without preparation, without hesitation, that you're ready to move. So clock to me is just this phenomenal image of, can I move this way and that way and backward and diagonally across? Can I be in a place where I'm really in good posture, this potent state? So these two things. And of course, clock means time. Your theme, that wonderful theme that you created, slow is new fast, right? So clock means also timing. So opportunities for us to work with our internal clock. So often we are in such rush. Our thoughts are in constant rush, spinning one thought after another. Slowing down, bringing ourselves back to a peaceful state. So these three images come to my mind when I think of clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of concreteness to a clock, isn't there? There's a kind of concreteness to it, like and of course a clock that was that ticked irregularly would not keep good time, right?
Mhm.
And so of course we're not talking about keeping time exactly with the movement, but we are talking about this, as you said, this capacity to move in any direction, which means there has to be a kind of willingness within the system to go in any direction. It's not just the pelvis, is it? It turns out not to be just the pelvis at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. My very first experience of the pelvic clock was kind of thinking locally that this lesson is about the pelvis, hip joints, and the lower back. And it took me some time to learn that to execute the lesson properly, you have to transfer movement throughout your whole skeleton. In fact, if you do it just in the lower back, it may not be a great lesson. It may actually force you to move in places where you move a lot, and those places are so often injured, like our bottom of the lumbar spine, L4, L5, L5S1. This is the most common place for disc herniations with spinal pathologies. So the lesson like this is an opportunity to shift away from the habitual place of movement. But that takes discipline, that takes ability to shift away from achievement point of view to process point of view, where it's not important how far I tilt my pelvis or how much I move, but it's important, can I move it with such a well coordinated action of my entire skeleton where the movement just flows.
So I just put up a comment there. Deborah's kind of taking a little issue with you saying that you're not poetic. She says your lessons for poetry in progress, Marek.
Thank you.
We know that you're watching. If you will just pop on over to StreamYard and register your name, it's very quick. Then you can say hi to myself or Marek, or ask us a question or make a comment, and we will be able to tell who it was that said hi. And that's very nice. It makes us feel not alone here, but in dynamic relationship with you. So, one of the things that I think starts out with a pelvic clock, of course, is it's because some people are going to be watching and listening and going, oh, yeah, I've done some version of that, whether they've even done it in Feldenkrais or not, because other works have kind of picked it up over time, have picked up their version of it over time. I've become more and more interested over time in the smaller clock. Like I've been bringing the clock way down, like, going from this big clock that I used to have when I was first to like down to maybe a saucer, or maybe just even, a really big watch. And that really changes the precision quite a lot. It changes also the sense of sort of strain to try to get somewhere where a part of my body can't quite go yet.
I think of black belt in Feldenkrais method is when you start to learn from smaller and smaller movements. That in the beginning, we are all very ambitious. We kind of think like, if I did the movement a little bit bigger, it will be better for me, which is not true at all. Learning how to initiate movements easily, simply, that's art. But it does take discipline. Sometimes my experience is just the same as you, Cynthia, that at the beginning was just go for a maximum, go to the big arch, big twist, big flattening. But that's really not necessary.
And also not even helpful. I think not even helpful for many of us. It was never helpful for me. I was where I would tend to get into trouble. So it's interesting how it can turn out I can get much more territory in this idea of mapping out this precision by going quite a lot smaller. I want to remind people that if you have not yet registered for the Move Better, Feel Better 5-day challenge, and what is that challenge? It is to do a single awareness through movement lesson for 5 days in a row. You can register by going to looking in the description of the video right here of this live stream, and we've got the link for you. So you just click on that link and you can hop on over and register. And you'll be able to choose between what we are calling either the beginner or people who are struggling with pain or injury right now, or the experienced, or they define themselves as adventuresome, which means not in an injury pain pattern at the moment, at least. And we would love to have you join us. It's going to be a phenomenal event together with a different teacher every day. And Marek is going to be on day 1. You know, the other thing that I think is interesting about the image of the pelvic clock is that we are going from the sensation of our own body and our own structure, and the movement of that structure, and then we're matching it to some kind of imagined but very clear external image. So we're going back and forth between our internal sensation and then some imaginary clock that we are kneeling over or standing over or have in front of our face, or we have behind our pelvis on the floor. We place it all different kinds of places. But it does something very different, I think, when we start to attend to two different worlds in a way, right? The internal world, and then this object that we can reference in our minds quite clearly that's external.
I think that the Feldenkrais method offers richness. That's how we learn, richness of stimulation. And what you were saying, Cynthia, about that shift from internal to external is part of the strategy that Dr. Feldenkrais often used in his lessons to shift between different senses. So, for example, when you're lying down and the teacher introduces the idea of the clock and you're starting to roll the pelvis around its outside of the clock, you're using multiple senses. You're using the tactile sense, meaning the touch, how your pelvis, how your skin, the sensors within the skin are pressing at different times, different places, over your buttocks, over your sacrum, over your lower back. So that's using tactile stimulation. Another one is proprioceptive sense, the sense of proprioception, meaning deep sense of yourself. The way, for example, right now, as you're sitting or standing or whatever you're doing, feel your contact with the floor. That's you sensing the touch, maybe touch of your buttocks into the chair, but you also sense, for example, the distance between your knees, distance between your feet, position of limbs in space, position of your torso, if the head is tipping one direction or the other direction. This is proprioceptive sense. And also we add kinesthetic sense, which is sense of movement, our ability to sense. So that's the richness that you are learning from multiple senses. You compare, contrast when something doesn't make sense. It's confusing sometimes when we have vestibular problems, right? When you're reading your phone in the car moving, that sense, one sense doesn't match the experience of another sense and we get dizzy. So part of learning to become better in movement, better with feeling better, is matching all of those senses, bringing them into more cohesive state when they harmonize with each other.
I like that clarity that gives, because I think that's really important for so many of us, that we've got one or more systems that are a little out of sync. And then we experience that sort of feeling like we don't know where we're at in space, or we have a little dizziness or a little nausea that comes up at different times.
And we can make it up with another sense that becomes so dominant that sometimes we become slave of that sense, that stop perceiving because we are so locked to one way. So Feldenkrais lessons give us the opportunity to, okay, I'm fine. After all, what's the big deal if I don't move perfectly? I can start to sense richer myself, environment.
Beautiful. And that's a great example that you just, I want to give an example to what you just said, that we can become so dominant then in one area that we become a slave to it. So what most people might recognize that as something simple that they've been asked to do, which is to stand on one leg with their eyes open, and they test great, right? And then they ask you to close your eyes and stand on one leg. And it turns out that the way that you've been constructing your ability to stand on one leg is being run by your vision. You're almost within seconds, you're not able to stand on the leg any longer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I noticed too that, Marek, that you do a lot to try to help us clarify the sense of ourselves by using external images like skeletons. And that's not always the case in the Feldenkrais method. That's some of your personal tendency to, I think, to go that direction. We're not opposed to it, but we don't all do that. And then there's also this quality of in the Feldenkrais method, which is throughout the method, is for us to learn to feel our structures and sense our structures and the relationship of these shapes and how these shapes move in, within ourselves. That I think is another way we can talk about the shapes and how we use images in the Feldenkrais work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was blown away by Dr. Feldenkrais' lecture at CERN, where he explains to his fellow colleagues, physicists, chemists, who invited him to talk why he gave up physics to do whatever he was doing. And in this lecture at CERN, you can check it on YouTube if you type CERN, CERN, and Moshe Feldenkrais. There are some videos of him from that lecture. In this lecture, he proposes a blueprint of how he works. What is it that he does? And he talks about skeleton. He talks about muscles. He talks about nervous system. And he talks about environment. And what he said, that his method is about connecting all of them. Environment, it could be social environment, familiar environment, but it also can be environment like gravity, like ground on chair is my environment right now. Floor, my feet on the floor, this is my environment. So connecting how we use our own skeleton, how we use our nervous system, muscles, and environment. And for me, it was like, whoa, this is a fantastic way, so concrete way of thinking beyond anything I learned previously.
That's interesting. Very interesting. I think so many people from the outside looking in don't think of the Feldenkrais method as being concrete at all. They think of it as being kind of nebulous and maybe even unscientific. But that's certainly not my experience of it. I mean, there's many things that go on inside of us that we don't yet know how to explain all the time. But my experience of it is that it's an extremely concrete work in its own way.
I really think it's the future of medicine and future of sports training and musical training and dance training, performance training. It's really, there is nothing alternative about the work of Dr. Feldenkrais.
No, I don't think there is either. Well, I want to encourage people to sign up for the Move Better, Feel Better 5-day challenge. It starts in 2 days, and you can click on the description to see the link where you can sign up. And if you have any questions or comments that you want to make, kind of pop those in real quickly before Marek and I wrap this up, because this is just meant to be kind of a little sneak peek to help you sort of understand what might be coming up if you are registered, and if you're not registered, maybe entice you to want to register. So in lessons like the pelvic clock, then things that people often will experience as results might include?
Well, it's multifaceted. I use this lesson with people who have troubles with balance, who would love to improve their posture. Because if you think about our pelvis is the place where center of mass is. Your center of gravity, center of mass is somewhere in front of your sacrum. So therefore, the smallest amount of change you make within that region, the biggest bang for the buck you get. To control your balance from your hands or arms, you have to make big movements. People who have difficulty with balance often throw their arms out. But if you learn how to navigate that part of your body, you can make minute adjustments and you right yourself. So very much balance, very much posture. I would invite every athlete, dancer, musician who would like to perform better, because the better your posture, the less muscular tensions you need. You're not catching yourself from falling. You're staying in such a solid place. And our pelvis is the power center of that. Of course, any injuries of hips, even people after total hip replacement, this will be a wonderful lesson, very safe lesson, no risk of dislocation or re-injury, very, very small risk. Of course, everything is, even sleeping may be a risk of hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
But
I wish to say you should be healed from your hip surgeries, not coming right after surgery. You should be discharged for movement.
Of course. But spinal difficulties, wonderful lesson, but again, not by doing a lot, actually by shifting away to places that it didn't occur to you to move. So I use this lesson very often with all these conditions.
So I remember maybe the first time I taught this series in a healthcare environment, and I called it The Power of the Pelvis, and all these clinicians giggled. I was like, where's all the giggling coming from? But of course, I think what people are thinking is maybe I'll have better sex. Could that happen out of this lesson?
Absolutely. Mobility of the pelvis is very, very sexy.
It's very sexy. That's right.
Very sexy and very functional at the same time.
Right. Yeah, very functional and sexy. I agree. Thank you so much, Marek. It was a delight to have you, and I'm looking forward to doing your lesson on Saturday. So
can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.